I would have thought that a pro-life group would be against this idea. But then when I looked at the detail and the fact that it will actually make it easier for women who want to end their pregnancy in the first 10 weeks to do so, presumably you would be in favour of that because it would encourage more women to get this procedure done earlier.
No, I would be against the introduction of the abortion pill as you've described there, and I think most people in the pro-life movement would have the same opinion. Your Society for the Protection of Unborn Children in the UK has criticised the pending change and put out a strongly worded statement on it, saying it just further trivialises abortion. You know, this abortion is abortion. And just let me state at the outset that our sympathies, love and compassion in the pro-life movement are always with any mother in a crisis pregnancy and her unborn child. But the best way to show compassion is not by making it easier for her to have an abortion, for her unborn child. It's just a shocking response by lawmakers and the medical profession. And I suppose ultimately it's a likely taxpayer-funded boondoggle, but a boondoggle with awful and terrible consequences for vulnerable human life in the womb.
But, I mean, I suppose it boils down to the notion of when you believe life starts, whether it is at the moment of conception, whether it is when the fetus is forming as cells, or when it is actually more fully formed. And I guess the point I was making regarding you guys being more in favour of it is presumably it's the least worst option if abortion is going to happen anyway, which it is, i.e., this is for women who are ending a pregnancy in its first 10 weeks. Now, I mean, abortion is happening. It does exist. And if you are going to have anyone doing that, presumably a pro-life organisation would want it done as early as possible. Later term abortions, I presume you are much less in favour of. So from that perspective, surely this is better than women perhaps not having this access and leaving it longer to have their termination. I know you're not in favour of terminations in general, but what I'm saying is that if they're going to have one, and if this is going to happen anyway, at least this facilitates it happening earlier, which must be something that isn't as bad, in your opinion.
Look, there's no way to really sanitize it by saying here, now you can pop these pills. This is, we're talking about an invisible, silent holocaust, and it's just hugely damaging, whichever way you subscribe to it, to the mother and her unborn child. As a pro-lifer and as somebody who's anti-abortion, I do believe life begins at conception and until natural death. No, I don't think this is acceptable at any level. I go back to what people have advocated in the pro-life movement. The alternatives to abortion are what we should be pushing here. Not abortion pills and medical abortions and making it more accessible. We're looking at providing, financial assistance for mothers in crisis pregnancy, housing, educational opportunities, counselling services. One of the things that has led to an increase in abortions worldwide is that oftentimes it's women find themselves with nowhere to go. Their family have shunned them, their partner, and sometimes in many cases one person step up and say, look, here I am to help you get through this difficult period of time. And they often turn their back on abortion and go on to raise a beautiful, healthy child, and they are glad they have done that. And I guess we have to maybe think outside the box a little bit. The social services agencies may have to step up their game. We may have to improve our adoption services, the foster home system, and so on and on. But, to talk about and advocate making abortion, accessible and more liberalising it further is not acceptable.
But this is going to happen anyway, John. I mean, this is happening as it is. I mean, women are able, as things stand, whether you like it or not, or are supportive of it or not, as things stand, women are able to go and take these 2 pills at a clinic 24 to 48 hours apart. Now, what's happening in that circumstance is that women are perhaps, well, they're having to make 2 trips, firstly, to the clinic. And when it comes to the second pill that they have to take, sometimes the effect begins immediately. So therefore, there have been stories of women who start to miscarry whilst on the journey home, whilst on the tube, whilst in a taxi. So, I mean, if this is going to happen anyway, surely for the dignity of women, and let's remember it is still their choice and their body, this is a better thing rather than women finding themselves, at least then they can go home and that they can be in the comfort of their own home rather than miscarrying in public.
Well, but first, the child also has to be recognised here when we're talking about the woman having a choice. But that's a whole separate debate. There have been studies done on what we've talked about. The abortion pill, as we're outlining here, has been available in the United States for quite a while. The most recent statistics I've seen, 43% or more of all abortions in the U.S. Are by this abortion pill methodology, and that's up from 35% in 2010. So we have some experience with it, and both scenarios, whether in the clinic or at home, are horrific from some of the descriptions I've heard. Vicky Thorne of Project Rachel here in the USA has said that while a medical abortion may seem like an easier method, in reality, it can actually be more traumatic for women and families. And in large part, that's because women who take these pills abort their babies in their homes. And because of, the recently expanded use of these abortion pills in America, she went on to say that the fetuses that are aborted in this way look more like recognizable babies than just clumps of cells. That to me is horrific. It's an atrocity. It's an abomination. There's no way you can call that an acceptable alternative.
But it's happening anyway. I mean, there are 180.
It certainly is, and it will continue happening. So, if you had asked me a generation ago what my reaction would be to all this, I would say I'm alarmed, but not surprised today. This is where the pro-choice movement is headed. We wake up every day or every week to some new iteration on it. It is the reality. But as people who support the dignity of human life have to oppose it and to step up our game and continue doing all the valuable work we're doing, supporting mothers in crisis pregnancies, thousands.
But
lives have been saved because of the activities of pro-lifers and families and individuals who have said, no, this has got to stop. Mothers in the UK and the US or wherever deserve better than being sold this regime.
But the one doesn't exclude the other. The one isn't exclusive of the other. Women can still be offered the support that they perhaps need, and indeed in many ways when it comes to the state, they are already here in the United Kingdom, perhaps not enough, but you can still advocate for that whilst maintaining a stance that women who do choose to go ahead with this procedure don't deserve to have a miscarriage begin on in a taxi home. I mean, these women, 4 out of 5 of the abortions in the United Kingdom are these early term abortions. There are 180,000 abortions in a year, so that is, well in excess of probably about 150,000 abortions are done in this way anyway. So this is going to happen anyway, but this way, women, the 150,000 women that go ahead with this procedure can do so without the risk of having to miscarry in public. Now, I get it. You'd like to be there to be fewer than 150,000 abortions that are done early term, or 180,000 in general. I get that stance, but you cannot be against a woman not wanting to miscarry in public, surely.
No, of course we're not, but we can't be in favour of a woman having access to this abortion pill. You know, as people who support life, whether for religious or other reasons, or the reasons of natural law, we can't be in favour of either. So I don't buy that argument that you're proposing there, Christo, at all.
So, are there any circumstances in which you believe an abortion is okay?
Well, look, this came up in the arguments in Ireland. Are there any circumstances when an abortion are okay? And doctors in the practice in Ireland were asked this, and they said there are some times where abortions are permissible, whichever is the most life-saving initiative when the mother of the life of the mother is at risk, and a decision has to be made. You have to leave that to trusted medical professionals who take that oath when they go into the practice of do no harm.
Okay,
but there may be a life-saving reason why an abortion, but abortion as a principle. Abortion on demand is not an acceptable option.
But what about, obviously, that's quite, I get that argument, and I, acknowledge that if there is a physical danger to the woman, I think it's common sense, and I'm glad that Ireland has recognised that, because of course we did have the horrific case of the woman a few years ago who didn't have that abortion that she needed and died as a result of it. But what about the men?
No, I'm going to correct you there, Christo. You're referring to the case in Galway. That wasn't a result. That was a medical malpractice. There was exhaustive studies done on that. The personnel on duty in that hospital didn't give that nurse or doctor. She was an Indian doctor working in Ireland. I believe she was a dentist. The proper care and attention, and the pro-choice movement hijacked that for their own selfish ends to promote abortion on demand in Ireland. So I just want to clarify.
Well, obviously, that is your stance on it. There are other people who do have an opposing view to that, saying that the culture of being anti-abortion in Ireland fueled that happening. But look, that's the opposing view. Let's not get into the crux of that debate. But what I'm trying to get to is that I get that there would be a physical reason why a woman, if she needs to have an abortion to save her life, that you get that is something that a medical professional can see as appropriate. But what about the psychological impact of a woman who ends up pregnant as a result of, I don't know, rape or incest or abuse or anything along those lines? Yes, physically she may be able to go ahead with a pregnancy, but psychologically her mental health would be irreparably damaged by that. So surely you would also accept that if a woman is raped, she should have the right to take one of these tablets at home or have any kind of procedure that she needs in order to be able to move on with her life.
Well, to put it in context, again, I go back to my initial opening statement. We have to approach mothers in crisis pregnancies with our deepest sympathies, love and compassion and welfare, and we have to step outside our comfort zones sometimes and make great sacrifices to put our words into action. And to address that question in context, that's a very small number of cases. And they call them the hard cases in Ireland, and they could almost be separated from all pro-abortion legislation. There are a lot of instances in America where mothers found themselves in that situation where they were raped, and they went on to have their babies and have given great testimony that they said it was the right thing to do. And there have been other cases where mothers had crisis pregnancies for various reasons. They had the abortion, and they suffered extraordinary trauma. And there's been studies done on this in medical journals. So it's not quite right to say, mother a young woman finds herself in a situation where she's raped and says, "Oh, automatically pop the pill." I just think I think that's too elementary and unfair to that mother just to offer that as the only choice.
Yeah, but you have to obviously acknowledge, though, that usually, I mean, there is a huge number. I think it is something like only sort of 10 to 15% of rapes are actually end up being reported and going to prosecution. So therefore, a lot of women
and what percent obviously end up, being resulting in pregnancy, obviously too.
Yeah, absolutely. But the point I'm making is that if a woman is raped, and the likelihood is, where the statistics show at the moment, that she's not even going to feel that she can report it, then surely having to then bear a child, if that indeed happens as a result of that rape, is just a step too far. So what I'm asking is, would you allow it if a woman was raped, if she'd been offered the psychological help that you put forward and she still wanted to go ahead with that abortion? Would you allow it?
Well, I think to go back to your initial point on that is that the law would have to be reformed that she can in comfort report the rape, and there should be no stigma to that.
Agreed, but would you? But if she still decided that she wanted to go ahead with an abortion as a result of a rape,
I think there should first be counselling services and tell her about the value of human life in the womb and offer every possible alternative. I would not agree to a situation where she would be offered an abortion service.
Even if a woman then had gone through the trauma of a rape or having been abused or in any way like that, and I understand your point, and was in a position where perhaps she had been offered the appropriate counselling afterwards, and she still wanted to go ahead with an abortion, you would not allow that to happen. You would essentially want that woman to be, I guess, forced to continue with that pregnancy.
I wouldn't force anything. I said we would have to show extraordinary depth of love and compassion and offer all these pro-life affirming alternatives, and nothing forced down this person's throat and say, look, this is what you must do. But I would not promote and advocate for a pro-abortion solution to it.
So just to get it clear, then you would not allow that woman to have an abortion if you were, I would not
legislate. I would not legislate for abortion on demand in the case of rape. I think that has to be looked at separately, because these are the hard cases, and there is a tiny percentage of cases, and they're being used as unfair leverage by the pro-choice movement to have abortion on demand, and that's at the root of the problem.
No, but the principle is still the same, of a woman having autonomy and control over her body. And I guess the point I'm making is that if someone...
The child has to have an equal right to life as the mother too. So that there are...
But the child would have no right to life if the mother wasn't prepared to carry said child. I mean, the woman's rights have to usurp the child, because the child is essentially, gestating in that woman, and without the woman, the child can't exist.
The child has the right to viability outside the womb and to be brought to life.
Right, but if a woman, what I can't get my head around is this idea that if a woman, and I get, I get your caveats. I get the fact that you are saying it's a very small minority, but you would not legislate, and essentially the word allow does come into this. You would not allow a woman to have an abortion if she was raped.
Based on all the scientific evidence, the peer review articles, and the best advice I've had, it would be a step too far to legalize abortion for that particular instance.
Well, then you would essentially not have woman have control of her own body after she had been raped then. I mean, I get you'd offer her counselling and you do all that kindness, but you would not have a woman have control of her body after she had been raped. Because that's a woman not having control of her body if she isn't allowed to get an abortion.
You're talking about the woman having control, but you keep missing the fact that there's a child in the womb, and you keep going back to the mother having the control over her own body. That's not compatible, with a pro-life position.
But surely the compassion would be that if a woman had been raped...
No, there's no compassion in saying to the mother, here, you've been raped severely. This is a terrible, horrible, horrific crime. There's no getting away from that, and justice should be done in that case. But you're doing a double crime and a double disservice by saying, now we're going to make it compound your woes by saying you're going to abort that child.
No, but you're compounding. You're
saying we're going to make it doubly difficult, and we're also going to encourage you now to have an abortion, and then potentially later on have psychological trauma for the rest of your life.
But that's not your decision. That's not your decision. That's the decision of the woman, and you can't possibly say that it wouldn't be.
It's the most humane decision, because
but not for the woman.
She could potentially be dealing with trauma for the rest of her life.
Not for a woman who's been raped.
She's already been violated, Christo, by somebody who hasn't been brought to justice, clearly, and now you're saying you want to do a double injustice.
But that's not your decision to make, firstly, and secondly, if a woman, you cannot possibly say that it wouldn't be more psychologically damaging for a woman if she'd have to go through the pregnancy.
There's not a huge amount. There's not enough of persuasive evidence saying that. In fact, the evidence that I have read would point in the other direction. That you're setting her up for further trauma later on top of the trauma of having been raped.
Well, so be it. That's her decision. That's not your decision to make. It's not anyone else's decision to make, because it is her body.
Well, we're trying to protect her life. We're trying to protect the child. And, if you're in the pro-life movement, it's a bit inconsistent for anybody in the pro-life movement to take another position saying, yes, let her have an abortion. So it's quite clear where I stand in this and where both of us stand. And we'd probably be doing the women out there who may this morning have some kind of a crisis pregnancy, to be offering them, helplines or guidance to where they can come for people who may be there to support them in a situation, whether it's crisis pregnancy or it's in the the tiny percentage of cases where there may be rape. There are a lot of various good agencies and charities out there. There are people there who can provide material support, housing, career guidance, and that's what we should be talking about.
And again, I don't think anyone
better than this, Christo, rather than us talking about and advocating abortion.
I don't think
I'm sorry.
anyone. I don't think anyone would disagree with you, John, that is something that should be offered. But I think that if a woman is offered those things and still decides that it's her body, I think it's pretty abhorrent, actually, that you would deny a woman that opportunity to have autonomy over her body in that situation. And if that means taking a pill to make it easier for her so that she doesn't have to go through the indignity of potentially losing a baby on the way home, I think so be it. It's not a pleasant option for anyone to think about, but it's less pleasant for a woman who is in that situation. And I think that's something that everyone needs to acknowledge, especially men, actually, more so. Thank you very much indeed, though. That's John Aidan Byrne, Irish Pro-Life USA.